Okay, so let's get started. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Book Chats. Let me just run through what's going to happen for our live event tonight with our special guest, David Levithan. So for the first part, we'll have an interview with him. We'll talk about his new book, Mysterious Disappearance of Aidan S. And we'll also talk about his life as a writer and things like that. And then you guys will get the chance to ask him your own questions. So during the interview and the Q&A, everyone is welcome to share your thoughts in the comments. Just want to remind everyone that this is a safe space. So we would like to ask you to please be respectful and avoid any discriminatory comments at all times. And just for today, we are offering 15% off in select David Levithan titles at our online store, fullybookedonline.com, for a minimum purchase of 1,000 pesos. So just check the link in the comments to go to our website and see our collection of David Levithan's books. So now that we've got that out of the way, I'd like to introduce our special guest. When not writing during his spare hours on the weekends, David Levithan is the editorial director at Scholastic and the founding editor of the Push imprint, which is devoted to finding new voices and new authors in teen literature. His acclaimed novels, Boy Meets Boy and The Realm of Possibility, started as stories he wrote for his friends for Valentine's, which is super sweet. And it's something that he's done for the past 22 years and counting. And these turned into teen novels, which you probably already read. Everyone, let's all welcome David Levithan.
Hello there. It is so exciting to be here. Even though it's very early here in the States, I'm very, very excited to finally travel in some way to the Philippines.
Yes, I understand it's 8 a.m. over there, so thank you so much for starting your day with us.
This is a great way to start the day.
Yeah, so well, before we get started with all the book questions, I just want to check in with you. How are you? How are you doing in these weird, strange times that we have right now?
I mean, I'm doing okay. I mean, it's starting to feel normal here again. I was out with friends last night and we were wearing masks when indoors, but we were outdoors and walking around in the park, and that was really nice. So it's summer, weather is nice. So I'm hoping that we've turned a corner, but I've been living here. This is my childhood home. I'm still living here, have lived here, moved back in here, but have been here for almost 50 years now. So that has been something I was not expecting for 2020 and 2021, but it's great to be here. And again, I'm so glad that we have these virtual spaces so I can travel even when I'm literally in the house that I grew up in.
Yeah. Oh, that's great though. And just in time for summer that you can go around and kind of see the outside world.
Right, exactly. I mean, I'm taking next week off from work basically just to go to New York City to like go to museums and do all the New York things that I have not gotten to do for over a year.
Yeah, good for you. That's so exciting. And I can't believe that it's now exciting to just go outside and
right.
go to a museum.
Yeah.
So that's really fun. But well, it's pretty okay for us here too. Not quite as free as in the US, but I think we'll get there. So in the meantime, we'll just have to confine ourselves in our homes and enjoy fantasy worlds.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk about the Mysterious Disappearance. I just have to keep showing it because it's such a lovely cover.
I'll show my copy. Isn't it
perfect? It's so beautiful. So and a very long title as well. Mysterious Disappearance. Aidan S. as told to his brother. Let me know if I'm correct. This is your first middle grade book that you've written, right?
Yep.
So what sparked the idea for this story and why did you shift to a younger audience?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I am very much, every book that I write, basically a premise comes to mind or a question comes to mind, and then I write the book to find out what the story is. Mm-hmm. And in this case, the premise that came to mind was, how would you react if your brother disappeared for 6 days and then came back and said that he had been in a fantasy world? Like basically, if your brother disappeared and then came back and said, hey, I was just in Narnia, or hey, I was just in Oz, like, what would your response be? And because that was the premise, I knew immediately that the brothers had to be younger, that they had to be 10, 11, 12 years old, that if a teenager did that, it would be a very different feel.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
so in this case, it was the characters that sort of guided me to writing for younger. And I still feel I've heard from a lot of my YA readers and a lot of adult readers who read it as well. So I think it can still be read by older, but for the first time, I decided to include the younger readers in as well, which was really fun.
Yeah, it was definitely a different vibe. I've read a couple of your other books, like Every Day, which I've got over here.
Oh, thank you.
And some of the books that you've co-written with other people, and it was definitely a different mindset because you were trying to get into the head of a younger boy here as opposed to a teenager, and that's like a whole different beast in itself. So it was kind of refreshing. It was very refreshing to kind of go back to those to that headspace where you can just suspend your disbelief like straight away or not. Depends on like how grounded the kid is, I guess. Yeah, so I wanted to know why you chose Aidan's brother's perspective, Lucas's, as opposed to just straight up Aidan telling or not telling his story of his disappearance.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the central question to the book really is Aidan telling the truth or not? Like, is he lying? Is he covering up? Did something else happen to him so he's inventing this excuse? Or did he actually go to a fantasy world? And I wanted the reader to not know. And quite honestly, while I was writing the book, I didn't know the answer. I was like, is he lying? Is he not? And there were some moments where I was like, he's definitely lying. There were some moments where I was like, he's definitely not. And it wasn't until the end that I just decided what the truth was. But I wanted it to really be a question about whether it's true or not. So if Aidan was telling the story, we would know whether it's true or not, and we would know the story behind the story. But since Lucas is telling it, we have no idea. And I love that it's really about trust. It's about, can you make that leap? And it's interesting that you mentioned Every Day, because another interviewer I had lately said that the central question is actually very similar in both books, because in Every Day, it's Rhiannon who has to be like, do I believe that this person who's talking to me really comes from body to body every day? And in a very different way, Lucas has to decide, is Aidan telling me the truth when he says that he went to this fantasy world, or is he, again, lying to me because he's trying to hide something else?
Yeah, and that's very interesting that for a child to be struggling with that question. I mean, like, I'm a grown-up reading this book and I struggled with that question till the very end. So it's a very interesting perspective to get Lucas's side of it, because I think I wanted to believe Aidan straight up, but there was always something coming up that just kind of stops you. So wanted to know also what the inspiration is. I mean, I guess it's pretty explicit, but if you had any other inspirations behind our fantasy world of a venue.
I mean, it's interesting because, again, I loved reading fantasy books as a kid, as well as mystery. So this is sort of the two of them together. It's a mystery and it's fantasy. And so when Aidan is telling his stories, it's very much influenced by the way we tell stories about fantasy worlds. And again, I want the reader to wonder, did Aidan really go to a place, or is he basically writing a story just like fantasy writers do? Because again, a fantasy writer has not traveled to the worlds that they write about, to my knowledge.
Well, we'll never know.
So we as fiction writers, we make up worlds all the time. And so the question is Aidan making up worlds in the same way that I, as an author, make up worlds, or did he really go there? And so that was really fun to sort of, you get glimpses of the fantasy world, but you don't get a narrative within it. And that was very deliberate, because I wanted, again, you to keep guessing, like, is he just making this up as he goes along, or is this a place that he really was?
Yeah, and I guess, like, as grown-ups, the immediate thing that you would believe is it's made up and he's covering up for something. And I guess for me, because it was a middle grade book, I didn't want it to get that dark. So I guess that was the string that I was holding on to, that no, it has to be a made up world. Otherwise it's just so heartbreaking. Yeah, like you mentioned also, this is a middle grade book, but this is something that I think can offer a lot of insight for parents or grown-ups or people of all ages, and we can all take away like some kind of lesson from it. So when you were writing it, did you kind of have that in mind, or was it just like writing for an older audience as well, or is it just like really telling a child's story?
No, I wanted it to be something that anybody could read. I really wanted it to be for all ages. And for me, the challenge of this particular book was with every single character, whether it was the kid characters or the adult characters, I wanted to understand why they felt the way that they did. Because again, they all have their own reactions to it and to the story that Aidan's telling. But again, for example, the parents, I mean, they, of course, Aidan says, hey, I was off in a fantasy world. And as most parents would, they say, no, really tell us what happened. Like, why are you making this up? As you said, the adult is very concerned. And so I can totally see their point of view. Again, I'm not going to give away whether they're right or not, but I could totally see their point of view. And so that was really important to me, that I wanted the kids reading it to understand where the adults were coming from. And then I also want the adults reading it to certainly understand where the kids are coming from. And so that you can just navigate the story together.
Yeah, and it's interesting that even the adults didn't have a central story to believe. Like, they were also like undecided within themselves whether to believe Aidan or not. So it's really like, it's an interesting take on the unreliable narrator, I suppose, because everyone, like, no one is reliable in the story. Yeah, so one of the adults that I particularly loved in the story is Aunt Brandy. She's someone that I wish I had in my childhood, someone who shows up and is very supportive, someone who listens and understands in a way that isn't condescending to a child as well. So I wanted to know if you had any inspiration when writing the character. Is she based on someone that you know that also showed you the same kind of support in your life, someone you looked up to growing up?
Yeah, no, Aunt Brandy, I mean, almost every book I write, there's one character who starts as a small character and becomes more and more important the more I write, because I really like them, or they play a very important role. And so I wanted Aunt Brandy to be, the adult in the room that is not the parent. So she has a different relationship with Lucas and with Aidan, and she can help them navigate sort of the adult world and the adult point of view a little bit more. And so it's not giving anything away to say Aunt Brandy is trans. And so implied in that is that Aunt Brandy has had her own journey of saying, this is my truth, and convincing everybody of what her truth is. And clearly everybody in the family has accepted that. That is not an issue at all. And so I think implied in her understanding is the fact that we do have our own definitions of truth, and that, again, sometimes we have to get people on the same page as us, but once they're on the same page, it works. So that was it. And then as far as inspirations, I mean, it's very interesting, because usually I don't picture anybody when I'm writing. I don't have anybody in mind. And when I started writing her character, I was listening to a lot of the singer Brandi Carlile, who I love. And like, I needed a name, and so I just put Brandy there, thinking, oh, that's funny, because I was listening to it. And then the more, again, she came into the book, the more, I will admit, I was picturing Brandi Carlile like in my book, giving all this advice. And Brandi Carlile is super cool and queer, and I love her. So she was actually, strangely, even though I've never met her, I don't know, I've seen her in concert, her voice and just the matter-of-fact way she goes about living her life, definitely Aunt Brandy is a part of that too.
Okay, now that you mentioned that, whenever I reread this book, I would be imagining Brandi Carlile as Aunt Brandy. Another adult that I kind of appreciated in the story is Officer Pincus, because I feel like she really took the time to listen and try to understand what the kids were saying, you know, and not just kind of get stuck in that adult mindset of hers. Yeah. So, well, since you've mentioned it already that and Randy is trans, I wanted to know if there was anything that you considered when writing your character, or in general when writing LGBTQ plus characters, because obviously we want to be inclusive and representative in our stories. So yeah, if there's anything that you could consider, or like how you tried to write them.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, being gay myself, and obviously most of my books are queer or have major LGBTQIA plus representation, and so that's something that's really important to me. It's very much a part of my world. I want it to be a part of my book's world, and so again, and a lot of times thematically, like with Aunt Brandy, it makes sense. It was interesting writing this book because I did not. The one thing I was very hesitant about was I did not want Aidan and queerness to be part of the mystery. I didn't want it to be like, oh, Aidan's gay, so he disappeared. Like, I didn't want that to be a plot point. So Aidan, and I don't want to give anything away, but Aidan, whether he is queer or straight, does not play a part in his disappearance. And I wanted that to be separate from whoever he is. So it is a different book for me in that, again, the queerness sort of comes as the story develops rather than up front. But I still wanted it very much to be there. And so again, that was just very important. And it's interesting because my next middle grade, which hasn't been announced yet, so I'll be very vague about it, it is extremely gay. It is like perhaps the gayest book I've ever written, which is saying a lot. So I think that is the book everybody would have expected me to write in middle grade. But this book, again, it's totally there, and it's just a part of the life of this family, which I love, because again, for most of us, that is what our queerness is. It is one thing about us, and it is part of the life of our family.
I'm so excited for it now that you mentioned that you're writing a middle grade book. Like, honestly, before the mysterious disappearance of Aidan S, I just kind of know that you write YA and that's it. But when I read this book, I really appreciated how well you were able to tell a middle grade story. So now that I know that and that we all know that you're writing a middle grade book, I'm sure we're all excited to read it.
Oh, thank you.
And I think that's also something that I appreciated about the story, is that the queerness was really just a fact. It was very matter of fact. It wasn't anything that needed like a spotlight or, you know, any special treatment or whatever. And I guess that's what representation really is, right?
Yeah, no, it is. It's making sure that you tell all different sorts of experiences within queerness. That again, certainly I don't want to at all put down coming out stories, because again, that is a major part of identity, but that is not the only narrative that should be there. And so I do find that a lot of the stories that I'm writing now take place afterwards, or take place once the identity has already been formed. I do have, which has finally been announced, a book with Jennifer Niven. My next YA book is coming out, which I know you guys are familiar with Jennifer Niven, and my character in that, again, he is gay and he has a boyfriend, but that is not at all central to the plot. It's just who he is. And I loved sort of writing a character that has been out and has a boyfriend and sort of has been living openly queer in high school for a couple of years. And again, the story does not hinge on that at all, but it's very much a part of who he is.
Yeah, we were also able to chat with Jennifer Niven a couple of months back, and now that I know that you both are writing a story together, well, you're coming out with a book together, it's just all so exciting. So many good books coming out, and we're also excited for it. So let's shift to kind of your story as a writer yourself. How long have you been writing, if I may ask?
I've been writing pretty much all my life. Like I've loved it from when I was a kid. I remember being 10 years old and like being really excited about finding the right word for the chase scene story that I was writing. And then I really became an editor before I became an author. That I worked on other people's words. When I graduated from college, I started working at Scholastic, where I still work. And it was basically about 10 years where I was working on other people's books without writing my own. And then with Boy Meets Boy, my first real novel, which is now almost 20 years old, which is crazy. That was just a story that I'd started off, as you said, as a Valentine's Day story for my friends. Like I didn't sit down. If I had sat down and been like, I am now writing my first novel, I'd probably still be working on it. But because I tricked myself thinking, oh, it's a short story I'm writing for my friends that just happens to get longer and longer, I was able to write it. And that's really how my YA career began, was basically with the story that I'd written for my friends that ended up being for the world instead of just my friends.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool. I still can't believe that you've been doing that for so many years now, and it just started out as something you wanted to give to your friends. That's really sweet. Yeah. So do you remember the first ever story that you've written when you were a child?
I mean, I think I do. I mean, and again, I'm living in my childhood house. That's probably somewhere in this house with me. But no, I remember, again, in when I was 10 in third grade here, like I used to write all these chase scenes. And the one that I remember the most was a chase scene across a hotel lobby. And I said that the character scampered through the lobby. And I was so excited that I'd use that word, scampered. Now I think that really people don't scamper, squirrels scamper. But at the time I was very happy about it. And like, again, plot-wise, you wouldn't really relate it to my later work. I don't really write chase scenes now, but again, it was just all action and like description, and that, again, I just loved creating a different world. So that was pretty cool.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, chase scenes. So what's your usual creative process when you write your books?
I mean, it's almost dangerously simple. And when I'm on panels with other authors, they sort of look at me like, okay. And I will say everybody's writing mind works a different way. Mine just happens to work this way. And it is almost, I mean, what I said at the beginning, whereas I have a question or a premise, and then I just sit down and write. Like I basically write the story to figure out where it goes. I don't outline. I, most of the time, have no idea what the ending is when I start the book. And a lot of the times, I know that the ending will be really important. So again, for this book, the ending I knew would either have to be, he's making this up, or this is real. But while I was writing the book, I genuinely did not know which one it was going to be. But that makes the story more real to me, that even I don't know, then there's really no way that the reader can know.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, or I mean, again, for every day, I started by being like, what would it be like to wake up every morning in a different body in a different life? This is not something I've experienced myself. So I wrote the book just to figure out what that would be like, and what it would be like to fall in love with somebody else while you were doing this. So my process really is just pure exploration. And usually I will write and rewrite the first 2 or 3 chapters until I feel that I know the voice and I know the characters and I'm ready to go on. So I don't just sort of go very like linearly, like zoom. It's like slow, slow, slow. But then once I figure out who the characters are, then it goes much quicker.
I love that your approach to all the weird questions that you get into your head is just write a book about it.
Exactly, to try to answer it. No, totally.
Yeah, there's no other way to answer. So that's actually really great. And because of that weird way of writing that you have, I'm sure there are a lot of people, including me, that you've inspired through your stories. And some of them may even feel brave enough to write their own stories as well. So do you have any message for aspiring writers? Everywhere in the world right now, especially in the world that we live in right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, totally. It is, I mean, I think it is just to let yourself write, to let yourself try different things, let yourself fail a lot, because I think everybody's like expects that it's going to be perfect on the page the first time, and it never is. It's always messy. And so when I'm asked, like, for advice, it is always like, let yourself be really messy.
Yeah.
And don't think you're going to be perfect. And what I do is I write a messy first draft, and then my friends read it, my editor reads it, and then slowly it becomes the book that you read when it's printed. But we could never print my first drafts. It always has to be done. So I think it is just, if you get an idea in your head, don't think about it too much. Don't think that you need to know the ending. Don't think that you need to know every single thing that will happen. Just try writing and see what comes out, and see if the story guides you to where you need to be.
Yeah, perfect answer. Thank you so much for that. So I think we can go to a couple of audience questions. I know that a lot of them have been asking. We can just go through some right now. Let's see. All right. We've got one that asked, as an author, how do you balance writing with reading books?
Oh man, I mean, I'm lucky because of my day job is as an editor, I have to be reading books all the time. So it's not even a question of whether I can read and write at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm always reading and writing at the same time. And so I've sort of built this little wall in my head between the stories that I'm working on, or the stories that I'm reading, and the one that I'm writing. If there's ever anything that is too close to what I'm writing, then I won't read it. So as I was writing Mysterious Disappearance, I definitely was not going out of my way to read middle grade mysteries with a fantasy element. I was like, you know what, let me not do that, and I'll read YA, or I'll read adult books. Or if I'm writing a YA love story, I probably won't read other YA love stories. I'll read other things until I'm done with my own. So that's sort of how I do it. But I am so inspired by other authors. Like it is like an inspiration engine for me. When I read an amazing book, like I don't want to write that book. I just want to write a book that means as much to me as it means that author. So it doesn't feel like a competition. It feels like they're in their way encouraging me to do my thing because they're doing their thing so well.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Just get inspiration instead of competition. That question was from Jet Marin. Sorry, I forgot to mention her name. So thank you for your question, Jet. We've got another one from Crystal. What's the hardest book you've ever written?
Oh my goodness. I think if I'm being honest, I think the hardest book that I've ever written was my book, Love is the Higher Law, because that is about 9/11 in New York City after 9/11, which again, amazingly, is almost 20 years ago now. And that was the first time where I was writing about something that wasn't just important to me, it was important to a lot of other people. And so I really did not want to get it wrong, or really have any false notes in it. I really wanted anybody who was affected by 9/11 to read the book and feel the meaningfulness of it, or the meaning of it. So I think that I felt a lot of pressure there because I was writing about something that was so much bigger than myself. And again, I'm very happy with the way it turned out. But while I was writing it, I kept asking myself, like, should you be writing this? Are you going to get it right? Are people going to hate the fact that you did this? But it ended up being okay, which again is a good lesson to writers, that the things that you're most afraid of, or the things that you feel most challenging, instead of running away for it, just run towards it, and really just again work it out on the page, and usually that works out pretty nicely.
Yeah, it must have been quite the responsibility that you feel, but as you said, you just need to write the story. So yeah. All right, what else? From Maricar, how did the pandemic affect your writing?
I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, again, it affected my writing in that suddenly my work as an editor and everything became much more intense. And so I didn't have as much time to write. And then when I was deciding what to write next, again, I'd finished the book with Jennifer, and the middle grade that has not been announced that I talked about anyway, the very gay, very fun middle grade, I basically decided that I wanted to write something that would make me happy. That again, just the idea of escaping into a story that was dark or harsh again, I didn't want to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds almost spoiled that I had the option, but I was like, you know what? I just want to do something that's really fun, and it's still meaningful to me. And there's certainly moments that are very emotional in that book, but overall, it was a story that I really was excited to go back to, and that helped me write while so many other things were going on. Was it became the place to escape, and so I think that's how I dealt with it. I had two other ideas that were much darker, one of which might be the next thing that I write. We'll see. But I knew myself well enough to be like, nope, this is not the time to go there. Like, put yourself in a better headspace.
Right. Oh gosh. Okay. If it's darker, I don't know if I can handle it, but we'll
Yeah.
see. We've got another one for Chris. Have you experienced writer's block? And I guess my follow-up question is, what do you do if ever you do experience writer's block?
I mean, certainly I believe, because I'm making it up as I go along, if I get to a point in a book where I'm not feeling it or I'm stuck, I don't try to force it. I step away from it. I will do other things. If it goes on for a few days, I will write other things to try to get back in it. And then another thing that I've found that really helps, and again, this helps as much in my day job as an editor as it does in my life as an author, is I find it really helpful to talk it through with somebody else. I feel that when you're talking about a book to somebody, it's a very different part of your brain than actual writing. Right. So I will, again, so to use Mysterious Disappearance as a great example, if I had been really stuck on, is Aidan telling the truth or not, I would have gone to one of my friends and I would have been like, hey, Billy, so I don't know. And he would have said, so what are some of the reasons that Aidan would be making it up? What are some of the reasons that Aidan wouldn't be making it up? And just by basically talking it over as if this person was a real person and we were talking it over, I would actually learn much more about the character and what I thought about the character than if I had just been sitting alone at my laptop trying to write it. So that's something I always tell writers, that if you're stuck, and again, you step away and you come back and it's still not there, trying to talk about it to somebody else, even if they have no idea what you're writing, it still helps.
And sometimes I guess it's better if they have absolutely no idea about what you're talking about, because then they would just treat it as an actual question and not a writing problem to solve. That's great advice. Thank you for that. We've got one from Eliel. Among the characters in your books, who did you enjoy creating the most?
Oh my goodness. I mean, so many of them. I think for sheer exuberance, I enjoyed co-inventing Tiny Cooper with John Green for Will Grayson, Will Grayson. Anytime Tiny Cooper was on the scene, it was fun. And then I wrote Hold Me Closer because I couldn't let go of the character. Yeah. And then for my own solo books, it would be A from Every Day, because again, A's life is so different from mine, and it has been interesting to explore what being a human being is like through the lens of somebody who changes every day. That has been fascinating to me. So I've enjoyed the time that I've spent trying to think as A, because it makes me rethink my own life while I'm in that character.
Yeah, gosh, A is like all the characters in all. Yeah. From Beatrice, how do you select your character names? So we already know the origin story of Aunt Brandy. What about the others?
It's interesting. Again, I'm on my 25th or 26th book. So after a certain amount of books, you start to run out of names, or you start to reuse the same names. You're like, oh my goodness. So at this point, I genuinely, back from the times when we would have physical signings, usually people at signings will write their name on Post-its and then you'll sign. And if there's a name that I haven't used that I like, I will keep that Post-it. And if you open up my desk drawer at home, there is a stack of Post-its with names on them. Oh, and every now and then I will just go through and I'll be like, oh, that's an interesting name. So I think there are a few names that I still have that I know that I want to use someday, but a lot of the times now it's random. But what's interesting is that I do really believe that a name is important, so I will try a bunch of names for a character and I'll be like, no, that doesn't feel right. No, that doesn't feel right. And then I'll be like, Aidan, his name is Aidan. And then suddenly it will all click in. Yeah. I don't know why. But that is how I do it. I mean, it is random. I try to, again, to make it even harder, I try not to use the names of my friends because that just gets too confusing.
Yeah.
So that eliminates a number of names as well. And I've had people, again, my best friend is named Billy, and I've had people named Billy be like, why don't you ever name a character Billy? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I just can't do that. My best friend will be in my head if I'm doing that. So that stays off the list.
That is such a cute collection, though, that you have just like all these post-its of different names. And that's such a great way to kind of name your characters, sort of like an homage to your fans, your audience as well, to the readers. Okay, so from Julene and I guess Raymond as well, what are your tips for young writers who want to explore the LGBTQIA genre?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I hope that you are doing that in your writing, because we need more and more people writing about the LGBTQIA experience. I think it is just be honest on the page, that it is about putting yourself out there as much as you are comfortable doing that. Again, making sure that you always remember that any aspect of somebody's identity is only one part of them, that if you're writing a queer character, obviously queerness can be very important to them, but it should not be the only thing that the reader knows about them. You should know a lot of other things to give them a full humanity. And you should do that for all of your characters, obviously. So I think that's it. If you are not queer yourself and you want to write queer characters, I think you certainly still can, but certainly do your research, talk to queer people in your life. If you don't have any queer people in your life, go online and read first-person stories, true stories from queer writers or queer youth, so you have some idea of what they're going through, but instead of just presuming that you know without any firsthand experience. So I think that that's really important. Again, I think everybody can write any story that they want, but I think it is making sure that you are honest. And again, if you can't contribute your own honesty onto the page, again, making sure that you've talked to enough people or read enough stories that you feel that you can portray that honesty in the right way.
Yeah, very sound. All right, we got one from Ilea. How does being an editor shape the way you write? And do you turn off your editor brain when you write?
That is a great question. And the answer is yes, I do turn off my editor brain. Again, going back to my earlier point about you have to let yourself be messy.
Yeah.
Part of letting yourself be messy is definitely turning off the editor part of your brain and letting the story come out the way that it wants to come out. And I've been very good about that. I don't try to edit myself as I'm writing. As I said, I will go back when I'm done. If I will reread a chapter and then my editor brain comes out and is like, oh, shouldn't have done that. So I will try to get it into shape after I've done the first draft, but while drafting, I don't. But as of how it has affected my writing, it has completely exposed me to so many other kinds of writing and the way that different authors write. Again, I will mention my best friend Billy. His name is Billy Merrill, and he is a poet as well as a novelist, and he writes his novels in verse. And so I never would have written my second book, The Realm of Possibility, which is in verse, if I hadn't met him or edited his first book, Talking in the Dark. Literally, it was working with him on his poetry and understanding sort of how poetry works that inspired me to write my own poetry. And so I think little things like that come out, again, with Mysterious Disappearance of Aidan S. I don't write fantasy worlds, but I work with some amazing authors who write fantasy worlds. So certainly I was very familiar with what it's like to write a fantasy world when I sat down to write my own. So I definitely learn lessons from my authors that then find their way into my own writing.
Oh, that's great. Okay, we've got one from Julene. Which author would you like to collaborate with for a book? I guess not counting Jennifer because you're already
right, exactly. Well, it's very funny because because Jennifer and I mean, we've been working on this book for like 4 years, maybe even 5 years. I mean, it's been a while. And we're friends, and we would keep doing events, and people would ask us this question, and we would just like not look at each other or just like giggle to ourselves because we didn't want to be like, well, actually, I'm writing a book with her right now. And like sometimes just to throw me, she would be like, I'd like to write a book with David. And I'd be like, oh, I don't know about that. But now the world knows. No, I mean, there are many people I would love to write books with and hope someday too. One of my all-time favorites is Libba Bray, who, if you have not read her books, Going Bovine is probably my favorite. Although Beauty Queens, which I edited, is also pretty awesome. She and I are good friends, and like every time we get together, like we laugh so much. We're just always throwing jokes at each other, and it's just like so much fun. And when I was editing her, we were throwing jokes in the margins at each other. So I feel we would write a very funny book together. So I hope one day we will get to do that.
Right. Okay, cool. Okay, from Rai, what did you learn when writing The Mysterious Disappearance of Aidan S?
What did I learn? I mean, I think I learned certainly how to tell a story that does include younger readers, and how to sort of see through the eyes of an 11-year-old as opposed to a 16-year-old, as opposed to a 48-year-old that I am. So I think that was really important. And again, I think it reinforced my knowledge that I didn't need to know the ending to write the story. That part of the trust involved between the characters, I had to have trust as the writer to get through it, and know that I would reach a conclusion that I'm happy with, and that's what I did. So I learned that too, because again, some books I'm like, I don't know the ending, that's fine. Other books like this one, I'm like, ooh, I really should know the ending at this point.
Yeah.
But it's giving myself permission to just keep exploring.
Yeah. Or, you know, if you didn't know the ending, then you just ended on like a cliffhanger, like a open ending.
Fill in ending here, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, from Raymond, which character in any of your novels do you identify with the most?
Thank you, Raymond. That's interesting. When usually answering this, I honestly pick a very obscure one. So I apologize, because this is probably not a book that everybody is overly familiar with. But I will say probably the character Duncan, who is the narrator of my book Wide Awake, is very much like me, in sort of, he's a little more shy, he's definitely bookish, but he sort of gets caught up in the idealism, in this case, of the election of the first gay Jewish president of the United States, is the plot of the book. And I've always sort of felt that he feels the most like me or my teenage self on the page. So I think that would be it. I think that if Rachel Cohn were doing this event with me, she'd probably say Dash from Dash and Lily. Because he is so bookish and so like into wordplay, and is going to grow up to be an editor. So maybe Dash as well, but Duncan probably has the closest in my heart.
Right. Oh, so you're not a Nick?
No, I was never as cool as Nick. Like I wish I could play in a band. Like I am a great music listener, but I'm not a very good music player. So
I'm sure in our own worlds, we are great musicians.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's the great thing about writing a novel, is like you can be a musician without playing an instrument if you write a character.
Okay, so from Joe Hans, hi David, how long does it take you to write a book?
It totally depends on the book. Usually it takes about a year. And again, I would say about 6 months of that year are me writing the first 2 or 3 chapters and getting that foundation. And then it might be 6 months to finish the rest of it. That's usually how long it takes. But again, there are some books that I wrote in 3 months, and there are some books that I'd worked on for 5 or 6 years. So it totally depends.
Which do you find is like takes you longer to write, when you're writing it on your own or when you're collaborating with someone?
It's interesting. Usually it's collaborating takes longer, just because it's two schedules trying to fit in
That's
writing
true. Yeah.
instead of one. And that's what happens. I mean, with Jennifer and I, we never intended to take as long as we did, but basically I would be like, hey, I have to finish my novel someday, so I'm gonna put this aside, and when I'm done, I'll get back to it. And then I'd finish someday, and I'd be like, okay, let's go. And she'd be like, I just started Breathless. I have to write this book that's under contract, and I'd wait for her to finish. So there are a lot of scheduling issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine. Okay, let's see. What else? From Beatrice, do you prefer writing in first person, second person, or third person?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think I prefer writing in first person, but at the same time, I find second person and third person much more challenging. So when I pull off second or third person, I'm more impressed with myself. Like I feel that first person is easier, and many times the reason I do it is because it is easier. So I like challenging myself. So when I do step back and do third person, again, I feel that I have sort of given myself an extra challenge. And so if the storytelling does work, then I'm happy.
Okay, cool. Okay, what else? From Joseph, in your own humble opinion, where do you see your new book in the narrative of the LGBT acceptance, but not tolerance, where kids are involved?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think that, again, I like that this particular book really is one where the queerness and the identity of the characters is woven into the story, hopefully seamlessly, in a way that is just like life. And I think that is part of the continuum that literature is on. And again, I think there's still some great stories where queerness is at the heart of it. And my next book is very much about that. But I think it is great that there are so many books where it is not the main event, as it were. It's just a part of life. And I think queer readers, I know I as a queer reader want that too. I want books where I am represented and I am part of the story, but the fact that I am queer is not the thing that is the conflict or the thing that's driving it. And I think that's what you're getting at with your question, is that being gay does not have to be a conflict or something that is a fuel to the plot. It can just be who the characters are.
Right. Okay, we got a question from David Levithan, Philippines. So yes, it's like a
All right.
Here we go. How do you think your characters are dealing right now during the pandemic? They're very curious about A and Tiny Cooper.
That's an interesting, thank you. I mean, again, thank you, David Levithan in the Philippines, my alter ego. But again, that's an interesting one. I mean, Tiny Cooper is probably going out of his mind. Like, I mean, I think Tiny Cooper has converted the basement in his mansion into a like broadcast studio / theater, and is probably doing like TikTok videos like 24/7, like being look at me, look at me, look at me, and is probably very successful at it. I'm sure there are like millions of people are watching Tiny Cooper do these dance routines, and like him like crying his eyes out while singing Driver's License. Like I think Tiny Cooper would totally do that in a second. I think it would be really interesting for A, because I think A is such an observer of dynamics, and I think, again, jumping from body to body when everybody is in lockdown, again, you would get to see so much about how the family dynamics or the roommate dynamics or wherever they were living, those dynamics up close. I think it would be very claustrophobic, but very interesting to sort of observe that way.
Right. I think A would be kind of like our eyes to the outside world, but it would also be like, it would just be random, so you wouldn't know where he'd be. And I feel like Tiny would be a TikTok star by now.
Yeah, totally. I'm glad you agree.
They also asked, will you visit Manila someday? Because we'd love to meet you here.
Yes, no, I have, the invitation has been made numerous times, and I very much wanted to go, and so many of my friends, like Jennifer, have been there. And so I really would love to. I have always been extraordinarily grateful for all of my fans in the Philippines. I don't know how to explain to my friends like why my books are so popular, particularly in the Philippines, but like I love that they
so
are.
great.
Well, thank you. I mean, you guys have good taste, I guess.
Yeah.
But no, like I've wanted to visit for many years, and again, the cruel joke of it was like literally at the end of 2019, I was saying to my editor and I was saying to my friends like, I think 2020 is the year. Like I think I want to go. I want to go back to Australia. I want to go to the Philippines. Like I think I'm going to take some time off and really travel. And then
Yeah.
the world had a different idea. So
Oh gosh, I know.
again, I'm hoping that I'm just postponing that, not canceling that. So hopefully when the world opens up again, I will very much be in the world. And Manila, if I am in the world, will definitely be a stop. Because again, I really enjoy that I can do this virtually with you, but it would be even better to be in the same room with all
For
of you
sure.
and getting to meet you and sign books and all that.
And collecting the post-it names for your
Exactly.
Okay, so I think those are great questions, everyone. Thank you so much for sending them in, and thank you, David, for all your answers. I'm sure everyone enjoyed that little Q&A that we have. Before we end the event, we'd like to play a little game. So we prepared a couple of lightning questions for you. Just don't think about it too hard and just say the answer that comes to your mind. And maybe if you want, you can give like a quick explanation if it merits it. Okay, so here we go. First question, paperback or hardcover?
Hardcover.
All right. Do you read all day or write all day?
I wish I wrote all day. I'm much more likely to read all day.
Okay. Do you read one book at a time or read multiple books at the same time?
Totally one book at a time.
Really? Oh my.
Yeah, no, it's very strange. And I will admit I will not name the book, but yesterday I had off from work. I went to New York City and sat by the river and was so excited. And I threw a book in my backpack and I started to read it. And it was like the most depressing book ever. I mean, it was an adult book. And I was like, this is not the way that my day was supposed to be. So I literally walked a mile to the Word bookstore in Brooklyn so I could buy a new book. I bought a new book. I went back to the park, started reading, and it was much, much better. It was a love story, and I was very happy. So, but again, even then, I was like, I have to stop this book and go get another one, one at a time.
Okay. When reading, do you bookmark or dog ear?
Oh, bookmark.
Okay.
But I will say, but because I save dog ear, if there is a passage I really love, or in poetry, when I'm reading poetry, if there's a poem I really love, I will dog ear the page to go back to it later on. So the dog ear means there's something special on this page, whereas the bookmark means this is where you are.
Okay, I like that you have like purposes for each of them.
Exactly.
Okay, are you an early bird or a night owl?
I am more of an early bird.
Okay, well, it's great that it's the morning there.
Yeah, exactly. So here we are. I'm a much better person at 8 in the morning than I would be if we had done this event at midnight.
Oh my gosh. Okay, great. So top 3 books that you always recommend.
That one's easy. M.T. Anderson's Feed, Craig Thompson's Blankets, and Ann Tyler's Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant.
Oh, okay. Great picks. Top 3 things you miss doing before the pandemic.
Having dinner with my friends at restaurants, going to museums, which this afternoon I'm going to the Museum of Modern Art, which is really the first museum I've been to in 15 months. So I'm very excited about that. And going to the theater.
Oh, great. Top 3 creative influences.
Oh my goodness. I think, I mean, again, reading other people's books and being inspired by them. I think I love to collage. I love to rip things out of magazines and cut them up and make collages. So that's a part of it. And then the third thing, which is something very much a part of me, which I don't talk about very much, is 20 years ago, I made a New Year's resolution to take one photo, at least one photo every day. And I've done that. So taking pictures and carrying my camera everywhere does help me see the world in a different way because I'm always looking for images to capture. So that actually is very helpful for me to create creatively as well.
That's great. Have you been doing that during the pandemic, like at home?
Yeah. There are a lot of pictures of collages or of like odds and ends in the house because I
Yeah.
haven't gotten out, but I've still been doing it. And every time I've seen a friend, I've been like, oh my God, I'm so excited. Can I take your picture? Finally, there'll be a human face for a day.
Yeah, that would be great to look back to though.
Yeah.
Okay. What is your favorite book that you have written or co-written?
I mean, favorite book, I mean, I will go with Boy Meets Boy because it was my first and it led to all the others. So I still have a very sweet spot for it.
Okay. Who is your favorite author besides yourself?
Oh my gosh. That one, I don't know that I can answer that one. There are way too many. I mean, I think if I'm picking one, I love Margaret Atwood. I will read every single thing that Margaret Atwood writes. So let me say Margaret Atwood. I think she's tied with about 20 other people, but she was the first one who came to mind.
Okay, we'll email you about the rest of the 20. So,
Right.
and lastly, and this is something that we ask all of our guests. So please answer as honestly as you can. Do you judge a book by its cover?
Oh, totally. I mean, and again, because I work as a publisher, I spend a lot of time making sure the covers look good. So you guys will be convinced to buy them. So I appreciate a good cover, and I've been very lucky. I mean, again, I love this cover so much.
Yeah. So pretty.
So I'm always very happy when I have a cover that I really love.
All right, that's it. Thank you so much, David, for your time. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Don't forget to get your copies of The Mysterious Disappearance of Aidan S. at all Fully Booked branches and fullybookedonline.com. And just for today, again, don't forget that on our online store, you get 15% off on David Levithan titles for a minimum purchase of 1,000 pesos. So just check out the link in our comments to go to our collections or our website and purchase the books there. And also, we'd love to hear what you think of this event. So please check out the link in the comments again for our feedback form. David, I hope you have a wonderful day ahead of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I really appreciate it. It's been so much fun talking to you. You're amazing, and this was great. Thank you, Fully Booked, so much. And thank you, everybody who's been watching. And again, all the fans and readers in the Philippines. It really means a lot to me that you are always there, and I really appreciate it. And again, hopefully we will all get to do this in person someday.
Yes, we cannot wait for that day to come. And whenever that day comes, you are very much welcome inside Fully Booked. We are just waiting here for you. So thank you again. And thank you everyone for watching, for sending in your questions, and for just staying with us tonight. We hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Stay safe and keep on reading. Bye, everyone.